The WOW signal. On August 15, 1977, scientists were operating the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University when suddenly a 72-second-long radio signal came in. When astronomer Jerry Eman was reviewing printouts of that particular day, he noticed a strange sequence of characters. The printout said 6EQUJ5, indicating a dramatic spike in signal strength. Upon reviewing it, he circled it and wrote, "Wow." The signal had come in unusually strong at nearly 1,420 megahertz and stood out from the usual background noise. But what made it even more interesting is that the signal was extremely close to the hydrogen line, which researchers have often called the most logical meeting place on the radio spectrum for intelligent communication. After more detailed research, it was clear that the WOW signal was received from the direction of Sagittarius, and there were no signs of the signal drifting in frequency, suggesting it couldn't have come from a passing satellite or typical interference. Astronomers repeatedly attempted to record the signal again, but in the decades since, the sky has remained silent. Over the years, explanations have included rare natural phenomena, instrumental error, or undiscovered astrophysical processes, but nearly 50 years later, astronomers are still searching for an official explanation. ASCAP J1832-0911. In 2023, Australia's ASCAP radio telescope identified a transmission unlike anything observed before. The astronomers cataloged this anomaly as ASCAP J1832-0911, named after its coordinates in the sky. The signal first appeared as just another distant radio source, but its behavior was unusual. Powerful bursts of radio waves were emitted at regular intervals. Each burst lasted several minutes before fading away, and roughly 22 minutes later, the pattern would repeat again. Almost nothing in nature produces such a structured, repeating pattern, so astronomers quickly took an interest. They quickly ruled out faulty equipment, pulsars, and radio transients. Even cosmic explosions didn't fit this new signal since they are brief and unpredictable, the exact opposite of what the telescope was recording. The ASCAP signal behaved completely different from all known causes. Its emissions were slow and structured, with clock-like precision. Further studies also showed that whatever was emitting these pulses was located in the Milky Way. Researchers were puzzled, but the immense energy output implied a compact and highly magnetized source. Some thought the bursts were caused by magnetars, a rare type of neutron star with an intense magnetic field. But magnetars have been studied for many years and have never produced radio bursts in a precise pattern like this. The more the astronomers looked into ASCAP, the less it made sense. But just as researchers finally seemed to make progress, suddenly everything went quiet. Any form of its existence disappeared, and to this day, it has never reproduced. The Ganymede screams. In 1996, NASA's spacecraft Galileo flew past Ganymede, which is Jupiter's largest moon. It was equipped with a plasma wave instrument designed to measure fluctuations in magnetic fields. Ganymede is quite unique in our solar system. It is the only known moon to have its own magnetic field. And since it's so close to Jupiter itself, which also has a magnetic field, these two magnetic environments often interact. This leads to charged particles becoming trapped, accelerated, and redirected along different magnetic lines. During Galileo's encounter, the instrument detected an unusual radio emission coming from the moon. The emission was recorded as written data, but scientists later converted the radio measurements into audio so they could analyze it more easily. But when they pressed play, they were met with something extremely unsettling. The sound resembled horrific screeches and wails, combined with metallic shrieks and high-pitched oscillations. To human ears, it was best described as a horrible, distorted scream, coming from something that seemed alive and in pain. Scientists were horrified, but reality showed something different. As electrons moved across magnetic fields and crossed the boundary between Jupiter's magnetosphere and Ganymede's own magnetic field, they generated a large amount of radio energy. And when this energy is converted into audio, it makes a sound resembling a distorted scream. The unsettling screams were simply the product of plasma interactions, but for a moment, it seemed that a moon, hundreds of millions of kilometers away, was crying out into space. BLC-1. In 2019, one of the most powerful radio telescopes detected a signal that reopened one of science's oldest questions. It was labeled BLC-1, which stood for Breakthrough Listen Candidate 1, and it was eerily similar to the WOW signal detected decades earlier. BLC-1 was recorded in Parkes Observatory in Australia. Astronomers had pointed the telescope at Proxima Centauri, the closest star to our solar system and home to at least one planet that could be habitable, hoping to catch something worthwhile. And the universe delivered. A narrowband radio signal at 982 MHz was detected, and just like with the WOW signal, this transmission stood out from the typical background noise. It was a tight, narrowband frequency, one that is rarely produced by cosmic sources, and the signal was only present when pointed directly at the Proxima Centauri sun. Strangely enough, it would completely disappear the moment the instruments shifted slightly away. After extensive research, scientists could not find an explanation for what they detected. Astronomers did notice a slight frequency drift, indicating that there was some form of motion between the transmitter and the Earth, but everything else was shrouded in mystery. And before any further investigations could have been made, the signal completely disappeared and was never recorded again. After months of detailed analysis, astronomers eventually concluded that BLC-1 was most likely the result of a human-made radio interference. The characteristics of the signal were somewhat consistent with known sources of radio contamination, so it seemed possible. But even though the event was officially classified as human interference, most astronomers do not support this theory. The long-delayed echoes. In the early decades of radio communication, scientists would occasionally encounter a strange phenomenon known as the long-delayed echoes. Typically, a signal sent by radio would reflect off the ionosphere and return to Earth within milliseconds. But beginning in the 1920s, some radio operators reported hearing their own transmissions return several seconds later. One of the first documented cases occurred in 1927. Norwegian engineer Jørgen Hals was conducting radio experiments, and he noticed some signals took much longer to return. Some signals would even return after 15 seconds, which was far longer than any atmospheric reflection could account for. These long delays suggested that the signal had traveled an enormous distance before bouncing back to Earth, but where it exactly traveled to was unclear. Scientists quickly started to theorize. Some suggested that unusual ionospheric conditions might temporarily trap the radio waves, while others thought that the signals might have traveled around Earth several times before coming back. But this phenomenon got even more mysterious when researchers noticed something unsettling. In certain experiments, the delayed echoes appeared to return in sequences that resembled patterns. Some scientists even believed that these delays were not just a delay, but an actual response. In the 1970s, Duncan Lunan analyzed the sequences, and he found that when the original sequence of delays was plotted on a grid, it formed a shape resembling the constellation of Bodas, centered around the bright star Arcturus. In his interpretation, the pattern of delayed echoes was not random at all, but instead formed a map around one of the brightest stars. He even believed that this map could be a beacon indicating the sender's origin, but most researchers were skeptical about this interpretation. They believed the mapping method was too subjective, and they reasoned that humans are very good at seeing patterns in random numbers. Another unusual theory was proposed by physicist Carl Stormer and engineer Balthasar van der Pol. These two had studied Hals's findings extensively, and they speculated that the signals might be caught in a massive plasma cloud in space. They thought this cloud was capable of temporarily storing and reflecting radio waves, but even they acknowledged that this was all just a theory. However, even more outlandish theories were built on top of this one. Certain researchers suggested the possibility of a memory cloud in space, where radio transmissions were caught and kept for some time before being released again. To this day, there is still no explanation for these long-delayed echoes. LGM-1. In 1967, graduate student Jocelyn Bell Burnell discovered an unusual signal while working with a newly built radio telescope. The signal came in short and precise bursts, and it repeated itself every 1.3 seconds. Back in the 1960s, a repeating pattern like this had never been observed before, and at the time, no known natural phenomenon was capable of producing such a perfectly timed signal. So astronomers and scientists instantly took an interest. While reviewing the paper charts produced by the telescope, Jocelyn noticed a pattern of pulses that stood out from the usual noise. The research team jokingly called the pattern LGM-1, short for Little Green Men 1. It was meant as a joke, but the name also indicated the research team did not rule out that this signal might be artificially created by actual little green men. After weeks of studying, scientists found that the signal originated from a fixed point in space. It was also too fast and too stable to match the behavior of any known star at the time. Out of options for any clear answer, the research team seriously started to consider the presence of extraterrestrial transmissions. But as they continued observing the sky for answers, they suddenly found similar signals all over space. For a moment, panic set in, but scientists later determined these signals came from rapidly rotating neutron stars formed from the collapsed cores of massive stars. As these remnants spin, beams of radiation sweep across space, resembling the beam of a lighthouse. And this finally gave the research team some answers. What originally seemed to be evidence of extraterrestrial life ended up being the discovery of what we now know as pulsars, UVB76. Ever since the late 1970s, a shortwave radio signal has continuously been broadcasting a repetitive buzzing sound on frequency 4,625 kHz. The buzzing sound is continuous, with only a couple occasional interruptions, giving UVB76 the nickname the buzzer. The signal was first noticed during the Cold War. Most of the time, it was just a repetitive mechanical buzz, but every so often, the buzzing would stop. After a short silence, a Russian voice could be heard reading random words, names, and numbers. And when the message ends, the buzzing would start up again. The origin of the buzzer has never been officially confirmed, but many believe it's connected to the Russian military. The format resembles other Russian number stations, which have historically broadcast coded messages to intelligence operatives. Obviously, a mysterious buzzing sound followed by random Russian words has sparked many theories. Some believe the signal is a dead man's switch, designed to confirm that communication systems are still operational. Others think it might be a channel marker that simply occupies a certain frequency to prevent interference, while some believe the buzzer is part of a Russian brainwashing operation. But over the years, the buzzer became more than just the repetitive buzz followed by a random string of numbers. At times, background noise could be heard as well, such as footsteps, doors closing, and even other voices. As expected, this created even more conspiracy theories, but to this day, there has never been an official confirmation on the origins of the buzz. SHGB02+14A. In 2003, volunteers from the SETI at Home project were analyzing data collected by the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico when they noticed an unusual radio signal. The signal appeared to be a narrowband signal, which is rarely formed by natural sources. For this reason, scientists have always considered a narrowband signal to be a potential indicator of alien life. After its detection, the astronomers labeled the signal as SHGB02+14A based on its location in the sky. Signals like these had been observed before, but what made this particular signal intriguing was that it appeared several times over a short period. But every time it was detected, the frequency was slightly changed. This shift could be explained by the Doppler effect, where change in frequency is caused by motion between the observer and transmitter, but the signal never appeared again in later observations, making further investigation difficult. Astronomers have theorized what the signal could have been. Explanations range from Earth-based interference to actual signs of extraterrestrial life. But an official cause has never been confirmed, and the signal remains officially classified as an unexplainable candidate signal, which is a signal that warrants further investigation as a potential but unconfirmed sign of life.